And then it says we're live.
And I can see us
on. It says we're live.
There we go.
And where are you seeing us live?
On Periscope.
On Periscope. I am, and I'm seeing that we're live on Periscope, and then we should probably go check Facebook. Reload. La-di-da. And we're live on Facebook.
Excellent.
Hi, Tracy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Peter?
I'm warm and moist because it's warm and moist here in Southern California, and I don't have air conditioning, but my ceiling fan is going, and I'm managing. It's better than Arizona, I suppose.
Yes. Isn't warm and moist how they start the script and Throw Mama from the Train?
I don't know. The only thing that I remember from Throw Mama from a Train is, look, cows. So what are we doing here today, Tracy?
Well, you and I have been having these conversations offline and trying to figure out how to best bring them online. And after the conversations you had with George Webb this week, live on Periscope, where you guys kind of tried to work through how to present his ideas, you and I decided maybe we should do the same thing and kind of crowdsource what would be the best format to present the information that we would like to, if it's live stuff, if it's deep dives, whatever that looks like.
I see that we've got 6 people following us. Ricky wants to know if he can be a mod. Sure. Yeah, sure. And I see Phil Willems is here too. Let me see. To make Ricky a mod, I suppose I probably have to get on the Periscope app. Let me see. I don't actually know how to do this while I'm on air. So Ricky, we'll figure out how to make you a mod, but unless you can tell me how to do it. Let me see. Can I right click on him and make him a mod? I can hit show. Oh, look at that. Check that out, Tracy.
Oh, that's pretty sweet.
And it matches our branding.
It's perfect.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So there was a couple of subjects that you wanted to talk about today. Ricky, I'm going to figure out how to make you a mod because you're mod Ricky, you're the mod of the stars. And but I don't know how to do that because I'm still trying to figure out how the hell this thing works. So we're doing this on Stream. What is this thing called? StreamYard. We're on StreamYard, Ricky. So we're also on Facebook, which means that people probably could be asking us questions on Facebook, and I'm not sure that I can even see them. Let me see. Watch together with a group. I guess if you want to ask us questions, you should ask us questions on Periscope. So that's the
probably
deal.
The best way to go for it.
And I know that Phil's watching, and Phil does his thing straight on Periscope. And I've been talking to him about different ways of doing this. So Phil, Tracy and I looked at StreamYard, and we looked at Restream.io, and we were looking at OBS. And this one just seemed to give us the most benefits with the least amount of hassle. But it's $25 a month. So we thought we'd try to figure it out and see if it works. But it seems pretty straightforward and straight ahead. So Tracy, there was a couple of things that we were talking about earlier. You were talking about somebody in Portland and all of the crazy stuff that's going on in Portland. And then we've also been talking about the nature of reality, which is what the kind of scope of the cast is. And so where do you think we should start?
Well, I think those two things are tied together. The Portland fighting that's going on in the street, is it real? Is it manufactured reality? The play acting?
Yeah. And then my friend Jesus just asked me a question. Tell us about that scoped rake.
He's talking about your assault pitchfork.
Ah, back there. Oh, wait, it's back there.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the assault pitchfork. That's for taking back the government because I figured that at some point we're all going to have to revolt, and if you're carrying an AR-15, you're going to get wasted. So I thought pitchforks, but scary pitchforks are black, and they've got quad rails, and they've got scopes and lasers on them. So that's my assault pitchfork. So that's the deal, Jesus. And yeah, if somebody had some assault pitchforks up in Portland, they'd probably make the news. Don't you think, Tracy?
I would think so.
So what's going on in Portland,
It
Tracy?
looked like, from what I could tell today, and I'm following a bunch of different people's feeds, but Nancy Rommelman's been on the ground there. She writes for Reason, among other places. And she had said the Proud Boys are out today. And that's the first mention I've heard of the Proud Boys showing up. And for the past couple of years, they've had ongoing street battles with the Antifa kids. Right.
Well, there was an election last week in Florida, and I know that Enrique, who is their CEO, is running for Congress. I assume that if he had won, that I would have heard about it.
Right.
But he was more deplatformed than Laura Loomer. So he was having problems just collecting campaign donations because the credit card companies were canceling him. So my guess is that you probably haven't seen anything from the Proud Boys because he was running for Congress. And now that he's not running for Congress, they're probably doing whatever they feel like doing on a local level. But, it's, all of this kind of derision doesn't seem to be a good focus. It seems to be a distraction based on the things that you and I have been talking about the nature of reality. So, and I guess I should probably elucidate on that, which is that I think all this left, right, conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat stuff mostly is, I was reading a book this week. It's the exoteric way of controlling society, getting a bunch of people to believe that they are in a democratic republic and that there's a rule of law and that that's a construction that's used in order to control the mass of humanity, when in reality there's an esoteric command structure that doesn't have anything to do with what we're perceiving, that actually is determining, the future of humanity. And that you can call that a cryptocracy or, whatever you want, but there's a lot of evidence for that. And so I think that construct of a esoteric kind of way of looking at the world fits what's going on.
So exoteric being what we're seeing externalized, and esoteric being what's kind of kept in the shadows.
Right, exactly. And I was reading a book on the Knights Templar, and they had some kind of a mandate from the Pope. I don't know if this is the 13th century or earlier. And the author of this book, Tracy Twyman, was hypothesizing that there is an exoteric management system in the Catholic Church. She's talking about in the 1300s, which is, based on doctrine and belief and the way that the masses are managed. But then internally, they have their own, at least in the Knights Templar. I'm not specifically talking about the Vatican. In the Knights Templar, they have this exoteric, we're Catholic, we do everything that the Pope wants us to do. And then on the esoteric, internally, there's actually a management system in there that's completely, the opposite of what the doctrine would be. So I don't know if that's true. It's just what I've been reading. And it does seem to kind of fit the worldview that we've got right now, that there's an exoteric thing. In the case of the United States, it would be the Constitution and the Republic and democratic elections and things like that. And then there's also an esoteric kind of command structure, which would involve, black operations, central intelligence, moving drugs, weapons, and human trafficking around the world in order to kind of create, in order to control the populations of the planet.
And now, from my little delving into that whole occult world, it seems like they like the idea of inversion comes up a lot. So it almost sounds like what you're talking about, the exoteric, then the esoteric is the inversion of that. So with the constitutional order, you're saying rule of law, equal justice, all those kind of things, due process.
Right.
But then the inversion of that is what's actually going on. And you'll hear people say this constantly, like, oh, we're protecting and defending the Constitution. They take the oath to do that. And then you look at what they actually do. Like you said, run drugs. You know, they're exempt from all the laws that we all seem to agree to abide by.
Right, because it's national security, right? So they kind of wear the United States like a skin suit, you know, and they use that as their protection. Somebody says, I look great. I do look great. Thank you. I'm trying, you know, I'm working on it, but I appreciate the compliment. So yeah, so I mean, so I look at the Antifa Proud Boys thing, and you know, in the scope of things, I mean, the thing that got me going on this whole thing is this book, The True Believer, by Eric Hoffer. Yep. And this gives you the psychology of mass movements. And if you read that book, then you've got a good basis for understanding how human beings are controlled on a mass level. And the reality is that in the exoteric realm, you have people who are true believers. So they believe in the Constitution of the United States. They believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They believe that all men are created equal. And they bond together in groups. You know, we saw the Tea Party or MAGA or whatever the group is on the right. And then on the left, you've got Antifa or Resist or, you know, whatever, you know.
Black Bloc, BLM.
Yeah, Black Bloc, Black Lives Matter, all those other.
Occupy.
Right. And you know, 98% of the people who belong to those groups, they are true believers. They believe the rhetoric. That's the worldview that they've got. But those groups are controlled at a certain point by people who probably have esoteric motivations for wanting to manage those groups. And so I'm not saying that any of those, that all of those people don't believe what they're doing. I believe that they do truly believe what they're doing. I just think that they're probably being managed by an esoteric command structure. And so I look at that stuff and I just wonder how much of it is orchestrated. And my immediate thought is that it's all orchestrated, that it's all, you know, a dog and pony show that's designed to divert our attention, to create reactionary responses to things, to control the news cycle. And at the end of the day, to distract us from the fact that there is an esoteric command structure to the world, and that you know, some people would say that it's Satan or it's satanic. It's certainly hidden and not manifest, and it certainly involves a certain amount of evil practices that we are hinted, that our people hint to us every day. And so I just look at that stuff and I wonder, you know, which is kind of what our logo is all about. It's like looking at that stuff and wondering what the hell's going on.
Well, and knowing what both you and I have been looking into as of recently, and you a lot longer and me a lot longer, but it's, I don't know, I feel like it's bubbling to the surface more with both of us and digging into operations that we know have happened from the esoteric side of this dichotomy here, where they have run armies, you know, well, insurgencies or guerrilla armies or whatever, in various foreign countries. So what's to stop them from doing it internally in the United States? Yeah,
and there's a lot of reason to believe, you know, the Central Intelligence Agency was running the Phoenix program in Vietnam, which took strategies that they learned from Reinhard Gehlen and the Gestapo during World War II, where they combined intelligence assets with military assets in order to create these kind of nighttime door kicking operations, which are completely Gestapo operations. And the breakthrough was to combine the military with the intelligence to create what they called fusion centers. And right after 9/11, one of the things that the intelligence community did in the United States of America is that the DHS created fusion centers where you've got the FBI and the CIA and the DHS, which is the domestic military arm now, of the United States military combining to create fusion centers. And then on the flip side of that coin, at the end of World War II, actually during World War II, there was programs created called the Gladio program, which again, Reinhard Gehlen, this is Gestapo ideology, were formed to create stay-behind armies in Europe in case the Soviets didn't stick to the Yalta Agreement. And even though the Soviets did stick to the Yalta Agreement, we still utilized all of those Gladio troops until about 1990. And then I assume, like most things, those programs just changed names. So Gladio officially ended in 1990, but there were other programs. Those things transcended. They turned into the color revolutions that we were running over in Eastern Europe that resulted in flipping a bunch of countries, including Libya and Ukraine and things like that. And now the chickens have come home to roost, to quote some famous ministers. And I think that they're running the same operations now domestically in the United States of America. And so when we take a look at Antifa, and when we take a look at the Proud Boys, I have lots of friends who are members of the Proud Boys. I think that they're true believers. I think that they do, and they're not white nationalists. They believe in
Western chauvinism.
Western chauvinism, right? But that doesn't mean that they can't be run. That doesn't mean that there aren't operators within their ranks who are kind of moving them in one direction or another. And I don't know who those people are or whether or not that's true. They may just be true believers. But in any case, a couple of them got thrown in jail in New York last year, and that's not good. So what's going on?
But to your point, you clued me into a great documentary called Hacker Wars, right. And I would encourage everybody to go watch that, and you can see how Anonymous and the Occupy movement were infiltrated,
right,
and became a giant, psyop run by one of the intelligence agencies.
Right. And I don't know if this video still exists anymore. It was on Barrett Brown's Twitter feed for a long time. And again, I don't have it to go back to refer to check my information. But if I understood Barrett correctly, he claimed or insinuated that he started Anonymous with a single other hacker, and that they wound up creating this PR campaign that allowed them to kind of elicit the support of a bunch of other hackers, again, more true believers. And unfortunately for him, one of the people that they reached out to happened to be somebody who had already been compromised by the FBI and was an informant, which wound up resulting with Barrett and Jeremy Hammond getting thrown in prison, and Weave, who's got a giant swastika on his chest. But I still have lots of questions about Weave and Andrew Anglin and those people that purport to be Nazis, and whether or not that's actually they're actually true believers, or whether or not they're operators. They're honeypots. They're designed to go out there in the world and collect followers so that it's easier for intelligence agencies to track them.
But to add a little bit more depth to that, the operative that was compromised already that joined up with Barrett was really pushing the agenda behind Anonymous and Occupy. Right.
Sabo, I think, was his screen name. Yeah.
I think that sounds right.
It's not Sabo, but it's Sabo.
No, it's not Sabo.
It might have been spelled the same way as Sabo.
It could have been. Yeah. But the point being is that he was being driven by the intelligence agencies behind the scenes. So they, in essence, created that whole movement.
Right. Well, yeah. And, if you go back, I don't know who the investigators were, whether or not it was Andy McCabe or somebody like that. But George Webb made a funny comment once that, again, I don't know if he was kidding or serious, that Andy McCabe never busted anybody for a crime that Andy McCabe didn't create. So
it's convenient.
Yeah, it is. It's an easy way to work, right?
You had a 100% win record.
Right, exactly. And you just go out, create a honeypot, which, brings us to people like Ross Ulbricht, right? Which is, if you believe what Ross Ulbricht said in his testimony, he kind of was a true believer who kind of went along to get along and then wound up becoming the patsy in that scheme. He claimed that there were four different people who had the login Dread Pirate Roberts. And so a lot of the things that got hung on him were attached to a screen name that he claimed that four people had logins to. So who knows? I don't know. But there's enough questions in my mind that, sending somebody in a double life sentence seems inappropriate.
Yeah, I would think so. But we don't control those things.
Right. And we like to think that the exoteric command structure that we believe in is in control of it, but it's hard to know whether or not it's an exoteric command structure or an esoteric command structure. So anyway, let's see if there's any questions here. Somebody said something about Barrett. What did they say? Barrett is hard on street cops, but he knows everything. So yeah, I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with Barrett. I think he's a really, really smart guy. I think he's been through a lot of really bad stuff. And I think he's in rehab right now, which might explain some of the more crazy things that he said. But he does have an expression that he uses that I use all the time, which is toy Nazi. Whenever I see the police kind of doing crazy things that police probably shouldn't be doing, I call them toy Nazis. My daughter doesn't like it when I do that. No. Okay. Somebody's asking about subgroups. Are they foreign national groups? Foreign national groups, who knows? On the esoteric side, I think that they're national.
Yeah.
I think that, a lot of the constructs that I see don't necessarily, they have more to do with operations or agendas and less to do with nations. If you understand that the people that are alleged to be in control of this thing are globalists, then they just look at countries as something that's kind of inconvenient to them. Passports and trying to, land at airports and stuff. But as far as the things that they're trying to do, they're trying to reduce the population of the world to 500 million people. They want one global government. They want one currency. They think that wars are caused by nations or religions. So they want to get rid of nations and religions so that we can so the 500 million of us that are left can all live peacefully together. And that's kind of like what it seems like they want. So nations are kind of a weird thing.
Well, nations have been a stumbling block for them since World War I. So there's a great documentary. I think it's called Apocalypse, I want to say, and it's a 5 or 6 part series where they digitize or colorized and digitized all the movie reels that existed from World War I. Because I don't even know what that would have been shot on, but there is film.
Right.
And it takes you through all the available film of starting from, they have Franz Ferdinand on the day that he gets assassinated.
Right.
And it's amazing to watch. But one of the things that stuck out to me the most is when war finally breaks out. There was a very prominent socialist, and I'm not going to remember his name, but he was in Paris, and he's out agitating, workers of the world unite. Because their thought was nobody's going to have a nationalistic tie. Like, this is the perfect time to overthrow the aristocracy that still existed and maintain power throughout Europe. And that didn't happen.
Right. You were going to be able to prevent war by having all of the workers of the world unite and agree to not fight one another.
Exactly.
And that didn't work out.
No.
Right.
So that's what, to my mind, begets the Frankfurt School's mission of cultural Marxism, to destroy that connection between the individual and the nation state.
Right. Yeah, and it seemed like at the end of World War I, they were almost there because they had managed to get the Federal Reserve put into place. And then World War I happened. And then at the end of World War I, they had the League of Nations. and that they were going to finally get their globalist social utopia, and then the American Senate wouldn't pass the Treaty of Versailles. And then that forced them into kind of a plan B, forming the Council on Foreign Relations and the Center for International, Chatham House in London. And then they started that Gramscian Edward Mandell House strategy of filling the American administration and every elected seat that they could find with their own people, so that they wouldn't have to repeat the League of Nations error that they had in 1919. So what else do we got going here? I'm just saying.
We got some more comments coming through.
Somebody says, we did that through Anonymous. We agreed that we were all being killed off, but no
Kabbalists were?
Kabbalists were. I guess. I mean, the true believers are the ones that get sacrificed, right?
Yeah, you're the cannon fodder.
Right. So, in case I missed it, did you mention Scott Adams, Joe? No. Here's the thing, Pat. Scott's going to have his periscopes, and he's going to do what he wants to do, and that's fine. Scott and I talk about the stuff, or we discuss. I haven't talked to him. I chatted with him about, kind of my worldview, and he doesn't share my worldview. So I'm probably a lot more conspiratorial, or actually I'm not conspiratorial, because I don't think that network analysis is a conspiracy. I read a lot of books. I probably read more books than watch YouTube videos, because it seems like the things that lead you to a more comprehensive understanding of the news and actually understanding things that are going on are contained in books, and they're published and they're out there in the world, and they don't become New York Times bestsellers, but they are out there and they're well cited by legitimate people who have journalistic backgrounds. And you can figure out what's going on in the world. You just probably can't figure it out on television or YouTube.
No, but to Pat's question, I will say that this morning, I don't know if you caught Scott's scope today, but he did talk about something. He raised an issue that seems pertinent to this. He was discussing that, Biden's basing his campaign around the Fine People hoax, which
annoys Scott to no end.
Right. But it's the zombie hoax. Like, you cannot be killed. It doesn't matter.
Right.
But what he pointed out was that Charlottesville, unlike other neo-Nazi, KKK rallies, whatever you want to call those, any actual hate group, those guys don't look as well coiffed, right? It was almost like I labeled it in my head Abercrombie and pitchforks, because that's what the guys with the tiki torches looked like.
Well, they
weren't hiding their faces, and they were attractive.
I talked to Baked Alaska when he got back. I got invited to that, and it looked to me like a setup. I don't know. I have this. I had, like, when the Berkeley thing happened the first time, and with Milo, and then I think it was Portland or Seattle happened after that, and then there was Charlottesville. Like, all of that just seemed so inorganic. It seemed so kind of like ginned up, right?
Yeah.
And so I had been talking to Baked Alaska. He wanted to know if I wanted to go. I decided not to go, thankfully. And I talked to him when I got back, and I said to him, dude, why were you marching in that parade with the tiki torches? And he said, you should have seen it. It was so beautiful. And I said, it's a scene out of Triumph of the Will.
Right.
And he said, who's that? What's that?
Oh, God.
So, those guys had never seen Triumph of the Will. They didn't understand the Nazi symbology of it. They were completely blind to that. So when somebody handed them a tiki torch and said, we're going to march with these things, they had no reference. They had no context. And so in that case, I think those people were true believers. I think that they were, they thought that they were there about freedom of speech and statues. And then somebody jumps into the crowd. Brittany Venti was there, I think. I think she reported that she was there. I think she's probably tried to distance herself from that since then. But she said that she saw that guy with the Nazi flag come in from the trees and kind of march out into the middle of this parade of people. And, you know, my comment would be, well, why didn't anybody say anything to him? You know, why did anybody let a guy show up with a Nazi flag without confronting him in real time? Unless they weren't paying any attention, you know, they were all looking at themselves on their video cameras, or they were looking at other things. But it does seem that that guy showed up out of nowhere. He's wearing, you know, 5'11" tactical pants, and which is, you know, the garb of operators. And nobody ever ID'd him. So, you know, those people all went down in gloriousness, right?
Well, it does seem rather stage managed, the
Right.
whole thing. Was it set up to recreate Triumph of the Will, to your point?
Right.
And just for some contextual background, like I worked in film production and served as a second AD for a while. And it sounds like a funny title because it is. But one of my jobs was setting extras into a scene.
Right.
Placing them and giving them their motion, and if they were supposed to crop camera crosses or where they're entering and all that kind of stuff. So there are people that have that skill set as part of their job.
Yeah, and it's funny because you can tell sometimes when things are not stage managed by the mistakes that people make. So, for example, if there a lot of times protesters in organized groups will all be holding their signs the right way. But it's a normal thing in a lot of those situations for people to grab signs and hold them upside down. And it happens sometimes. And the reality is that if you see an upside down sign in a group of people, that's usually a pretty good sign that it's an organic group, because a stage managed group would have somebody go up and tap that person on the shoulder and make sure that their sign was turned the right way, in order to make sure that when the photographers show up and start taking pictures, that it doesn't make the entire group look dumb because there's one person with their sign upside down. So, but those are the kinds of things that I pay attention to, I look at.
Yeah. Well, both you and I have that experience to be like, okay, what's in the frame?
Right. What's in the production? Because the picture, you know, modifies people. So should we see if anybody's got any questions?
Sure.
Oh, let me see. It's amusing that Antifa can't riot. Right, what somebody said.
I assure you they can riot.
Film students study Lenny Riefenstahl. That is true. Millie was there. Millie was where? Millie was.
I think they're talking about Millie was at Charlottesville.
At Charlottesville, yeah. It's amusing that Antifa can't riot at Second Amendment rallies.
Didn't they try to do that in Virginia? And there were a handful of them that showed up, and that was the end of it.
Right. And again, the having stage managed enough productions, you have to understand that when you get huge amounts of people in a place at one place at a time, there's a huge amount of organization that's required in order to do that. There's this, there's this concept. I think even Klaus Schwab talks about it in his latest book, this concept of flash mobs. And Baked Alaska was very good at doing flash mobs in the last election. Mm-hmm. But his flash mobs had 30 or 40 people. You know, they weren't, and 30 or 40 people in one periscope can look like more people, because of the number of people that you can fit into your camera's eye view.
Well, we saw that, right, with the people sitting on the beach during the lockdown, where from one angle it looked like everybody's sitting on top of each other.
Right. Yeah. If you take a long lens and lower the camera angle, you can make everybody stacked on top of each other. And if you raise the camera and do a wider camera angle, then everybody looks like they're sitting separated from one another. So anyway, so what are you thinking about this format, Tracy? Is it working for you? I mean, we couldn't do YouTube today, but we could do Facebook and Periscope.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like Periscope. I always have. I like the interactive aspect of it, as long as it's distracting.
Barnes wants to know if you could recap Scott's comments this morning.
So what Scott was saying is, to his eye, it looked a little suspect that you would have all these open racists out in the streets, not covering their faces and looking more educated than we're used to be polite about the situation. Because if you see the rallies where there's going to be a KKK rally and there's more media there than actual rally attendees, it's usually a handful of folks that don't look like they shop anywhere aside from maybe Walmart or BJ's for their clothing. It's questionable whether or not that they have all of their teeth, that sort of thing. Like, you think hillbilly backwoods.
Right.
But the kids that were in Charlottesville didn't look like that.
Well, my experience of all of the people that went to Charlottesville, the people that I knew personally that went there, is they're all college educated, that they're all philosophically sophisticated. That is, they follow people like Curtis Yarvin, like Mencius Moldbug, although he's recently trying to distance himself from certain aspects of that. But the neo-reactionary movement was based on a philosophical worldview. And Curtis lately has been kind of doing a roadshow tour where his assumption has been that people that were following the dark enlightenment didn't understand that he was talking about the status quo, that he was trying to explain to people, hey, we live in this kind of fascist monarchy, you should get over it. Which is not what people were thinking during Charlottesville. They were thinking, oh, this is something that we need to buck up against this kind of socialist utopia that's being foisted on us.
Right. And I have to look at Charlottesville now. What are we, 3 years later at this point? That was 2017, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
And question whether or not that was stage managed from the beginning by the left. Because I remember Gavin McInnes watching his show building up to that. And initially he was going and the Proud Boys were going to go. And then he just started to get a vibe that said, don't do this.
Right.
I can't remember the one guy's name, Jason something, that was one of the organizers. And Gavin had him on his show and they got into it. And he's like, you smell like a plant to me. Like, you smell like a rat. I'm not going to your thing.
Right.
It's a setup. And so was it a setup perpetrated by those against Trump and that whole movement to make them look bad and thinking, oh, if we can pull off this big event, that will organically then grow itself? Well, that's
what it feels like to me.
But nothing ever came out of that then. It wasn't like, we keep hearing Trump is leading these white nationalists and they've been emboldened. Well, where the hell have they been since Charlottesville? Shouldn't their numbers be swelling and they don't fear, being in front of cameras and they're not afraid to stay in the shadows anymore? It just doesn't add up.
Right. Well, if you look at a lot of the people that were being, stage managed by Steve Bannon, Katie McHugh and Charles Johnson and who else? Milo Yiannopoulos, all of them have basically been canceled off of the internet for their belief systems. And, I have reason to believe that they were being, Katie McHugh says that she was being encouraged by Bannon to do that stuff. And I don't
specifically.
Well, I mean, she had an incredibly edgy Twitter feed, where she was saying a lot of identitarian things or hinting at them. And, she claims in her Politico interview that, she was being encouraged to do that. So all of those people went down in flames, which was kind of the infrastructure, I think, for that stuff. And Jason, whatever his name is, I think was part of that also. So,
You brought him up now. Do you want to talk about Bannon?
What do you want to talk about? I mean, he got arrested. I haven't really trusted him since he went into the White House and did that interview with Wolf and claimed that Donald Trump Jr. was a traitor for meeting with Veselnitskaya in the Trump Tower meeting, and that Donald Trump would be removed from office before he served his term by the 25th Amendment. Like, at that point, it was like, oh, he wasn't supposed to win, and that was your job. And then somehow you accidentally, or you managed to weasel your way in there. But I don't understand how you have those conversations with a reporter when you're actually working in the White House. He kind of lost me at that point.
Right. And when you frame yourself as being so savvy with dealing with the press.
Right. And what you and I have been talking about for a long time, that we've been discussing, and it's part of the reason that we started doing this thing publicly, is that hypnosis is a real thing. Thank you, Scott Adams, for turning me on to the whole discipline. But I've been studying it for a long time now, for a couple of years. And if you look at specific people, it's not just Bannon. It's Ben Shapiro. It's Rachel Maddow. It's Sean Hannity. It's Tucker Carlson. There's a hypnotic technique called the yes ladder, or a Gilligan loop, where you repeat a bunch of things in a row, where you get the people who are listening to you to say yes in their heads. And it's a hypnotic technique that induces people into a kind of a trance state where you can kind of suggest things to them. And if you break down all of these people and you look at their approach to language linguistically, they all use very similar techniques in order to, gather crowds and organize them, appeal to their frustration levels, and then suggest solutions. It's good to be sensitive to that stuff, and to that, and all of those people kind of fit into that category, and that's why I don't pay much attention to any of them. So
fair enough. I see a bunch of comments are coming through, Peter.
Yeah, somebody says that's Napoleon Hill salesmanship. Yeah, that's right. Napoleon Hill is and all of this fits under persuasion, but persuasion is a euphemism for hypnosis, for hypnotizing people. And somebody said, what's the loop? The loop is getting somebody into a yes ladder and then forming and then
you called it a Gilligan loop. I think that's what he's asking.
Yeah, Steve Gilligan is a famous hypnotist, and so the Gilligan loop was named after him because it's a technique that he uses. I don't know if he ever called it that, but somebody else that I've watched called it a Gilligan loop.
I think a yes ladder is much easier to grasp the concept of, because as soon as you said Gilligan loop, I'm thinking Gilligan's Island.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's how I remember it, is Gilligan's Island. But a yes ladder is an easier way to remember it. And I learned that from what's his name, Neil Strauss, in The Game.
The Game.
Yeah, which is a good 101 book on hypnosis. So it's got a good syllabus. So that's what it's called. Yeah, it's called the yes ladder. And you know what? I tweeted this out yesterday, and I think that it's good advice for anybody. If you're watching somebody on a little rectangle like you're watching me right now, and they're talking about things, and you catch yourself saying yes to that person, like, oh yeah, I agree with that person. Oh yeah, I agree with that person. If you catch yourself saying yes more than 3 or 4 times in a row, just watch out. Be careful. Yeah, that may be a person that you agree with, and that may be a person who's trying to coerce or manipulate, not coerce, but lure, seduce you into believing a certain worldview. And it works. It's a real effective system. And if you understand that that's what's going on, your spidey senses will pop up, and then you can analyze it kind of more on a empirical way.
Did you see any difference between, say, a yes ladder and pacing and leading?
Well, a yes ladder is a way of pacing. It's to
get then to be leading, right?
Right. And pacing and leading is just a different way of saying creating rapport and then making a suggestion. There's been a lot of lawsuits involved in neurolinguistic programming because of the terminology that people use. But the reality is that the process is they're arguing over what they label things. And the idea is that if you can get somebody relaxed enough to accept whatever it is that you're saying, there's a much better chance that they'll believe you and they'll do or act on whatever your words are than they would if you were having some kind of a confrontation, which is why bullet point argument style doesn't really change anybody's mind. That's another tell. Steve Bannon, Ben Shapiro, Rachel Maddow, Bill Maher, like what they'll do is they'll come up with a list of bullet points, Sean Hannity, of things that you agree with. And they'll just fire them out in rapid order. And that's just a way to kind of like put you into a trance.
Yeah, because it overwhelms your brain. Right.
And, you know, Sean Hannity, you can imagine he's got his like yellow legal pad and he's got all this stuff written down. He's like Sigourney Weaver in Working Girl, and he's just checking the things off the list as he's, you know, his monologue every day on the radio when it's just this rapid fire thing that he's hitting you with. And it's like, yes, 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 yeah. If you already believe that stuff that he's talking about, you're just going to say yes 500 times in a row. And then whatever he finishes with, you're just going to go with, and you're going to be talking about it at a party the next day as if it's your own ideas and your own thoughts.
And you've never slowed down to examine it.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, Charles Manson used this. Yes.
Yes.
It's lots of people use this. It's, you know, it's MK Ultra. It's, you know, it's neurolinguistic programming. It's because it works. You know, it's a lot of music. It's a lot of religious ritual. You find it in a lot of places because it works. It's a good mechanism for programming human beings. So, what else? Fundamentalist preachers call this can you pronounce that word?
I don't know. Can you put it up on the screen?
Yeah, I can. Oh yeah, I can do that. It's a nice picture Barnes has got there.
Enthymeme?
Enthymeme. And if Phil is still watching on here, he's an exegete, and he could probably tell you the etymological history of the word enthymeme and how it is applied to fundamentalist preachers. So, you know, we could have Phil as a guest one day. So.
Excellent.
Or we could have Barnes as a guest, and
we could too.
And he could talk about his movie. So, any man in the arena. All right, we've been on for 47 minutes and 38 seconds. Does anybody else have any other questions? We're looking at questions in Periscope, in case you're wondering. Although I may be able to see if there's any in Facebook. Jesus asked me that first question in Facebook. I guess that's it, Tracy. Should we call it a day?
I don't know. I was seeing somebody else asking some questions now.
Oh, look, Phil, the exegete, said that he'll go check out the word.
Thank you, Phil.
So we can get Phil and Michael to discuss enthymeme. Is that what it is? Enthymeme.
That's how I would pronounce it.
What's entha?
Well, I'm trying to think of anything else that starts with that.
Anyway.
Well, I know before we got on here, Peter, you were talking about are there any good videos of the LARPing preppies? I don't know, Barnes, if there are any good videos of the LARPing preppies. I'm sure there are, but it really does look like Abercrombie and pitchforks. I just remember it. It's cargo shorts, so you can tell certain people, certain big influencers were involved in the cargo shorts when they were passing out wardrobe. It's like cargos and polos.
Is that why Jack Posobiec is so anti-cargo shorts?
It very well could be.
Because it has something to do with Charlottesville.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But I mean, you understand, like a night shoot looks really pretty if you have open flame instead of harsh light.
Right. Yep.
So it was very cinematically arranged.
It was orchestrated. There was a lot of triumph. When I saw that, I went, man, this is Triumph of the Will. Only
Yeah.
I don't think that the Third Reich guys would have called them tiki torches. I think that they would have had a much more, masculine and German sounding name for the fire.
Fire sticks.
The fire sticks, exactly.
But the one thing that you wanted to kind of get into a little bit that we had talked about was the Carter Page.
Right. Oh yeah. We were talking about the outrage. That's right. We were talking about Ali, and then we were talking about Laura Logan. So Laura Logan went on a kind of a Twitter, what do you call it? A screed or a Twitter
Twitter rant or
Twitter rant where she was sticking up for Carter Page. And I understand her worldview and why she's sticking up for Carter Page, but George Webb brings up good questions about Carter Page that I don't think that anybody's ever asked Carter Page, which is, okay, you said you were working for the CIA, and that's why they shouldn't have been running a FISA on you. But nobody's ever asked you if you were working for the CIA when you went into the Trump campaign in the first place. That is, were you placed into the Trump campaign as an intelligence asset? Nobody's ever asked him that question. And so I would say to Laura Logan, since she's a legitimate, first-class reporter, it would be great if somebody asked Carter Page if he was working as an intelligence asset when he went into the Trump campaign. That would be number one. That would make me feel better about Carter Page.
Right, because the story that we know is that he worked for the CIA prior to that. It was the relationship ended in 2014. But
I don't know the answer to that question, which is why
that's my recollection that's what's in the Mueller report.
Right,
if I remember correctly.
So it would be great if somebody got him on the record answering that question.
I'd like to have Papadopoulos ask that question as well.
I think Papadopoulos needs to own that question also, because do they both have intelligence backgrounds, or does?
Well, Papadopoulos is kind of on the fringes of that.
Right.
I think he was at the Hudson Institute, which has some ties that are questionable. And then I just think his story is a little bit strange. He said he got onto the campaign by reaching out to, I think, Lewandowski via LinkedIn.
Right. And so that's one big question. And then Ali started a kerfuffle with this woman, Tori. So there's this video that came out last week, Shadowgate, and George Webb had interviewed, and Mark Kulak had interviewed this guy, Patrick Berge, who claims that he worked for General Jim Jones, developing social media information warfare technology that involved bots and personas and basically doing crowd control in social media spaces, and that technology got privatized and then licensed or sold as a service to different political campaigns inside the United States. It was designed as a weapon against our foreign adversaries.
Yeah.
And Millie Weaver did a special on it where Berge's information, which seemed to check out. I mean, when you went and checked him out online and did background checks on him and stuff, it all seemed to make sense. He got Millie put him together with this other source that I had no knowledge of before, a woman named Tori, and her claims were pretty bold. She claimed that she was an intelligence contractor, and that as part of her console, her Edward Snowden-like console that she was using in her day-to-day work, that she was actually listening to conversations between people like Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi, who were plotting the coup. But then there were some interstitial graphics that were put together in that video where they were connecting Paul Manafort and Roger Stone specifically to some of these operations that General Jim Jones had to do with. And those things kind of made me raise an eyebrow a little bit when I was watching it. Like, is that true? Is that really the case? But when people are giving you quote unquote eyewitness testimony and they're claiming things that they could go to jail for, on video, live and on video, and it's going out on the internet, you have to assume that, they're putting themselves at certain risk. And so there's a lot of issues or problems with that video. And then Millie gets arrested, and then the video gets released. And is that a publicity stunt, or is that just bad luck? What is that? It all kind of seems to be taken out of a page out of Ryan Holiday's Trust Me, I'm Lying book, which is a book on media manipulation. And so I have big questions about it, but Ali seemed to come to the conclusion that he thinks that she's a phony and a fraud, and was going after her yesterday. And I have my issue is that if Bergey's information is correct, even if she's a liar, then it's going to get lost. The same way a lot of the information in Pizzagate got lost, where, there was a lot of kind of crazy stuff that was related to that, but no reporter ever asked John Podesta what he meant by his lost handkerchief, what somebody meant by his lost handkerchief, or what $65,000 in hot dogs meant, or, any of those other kind of like weird references in the leaked emails. Nobody ever asked him, what does that mean? And, it doesn't have to be an FBI agent. It could be a reporter asking him, hey, what did that mean? Those questions get lost because it gets thrown in. I call it the poop sushi. It's like you go to the best sushi restaurant in the world with the best sushi chef in the world, and they lay out the best plate of sushi that's ever been created in front of you, but somebody tells you that one piece has got a piece of cat poop in it. Like, are you going to eat it? Probably not. So that's what happens, is that you get this cat poop sushi associated with some good information that may actually lead to other things. But at that point, the whole thread dies. And that's a counterintelligence operation. That's how that stuff works. So
the whole thing gets the taint of the cat poop.
Yep, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I watched it too, and I was much more interested in what Bergey had to say. And I don't think that they did a good enough job explaining the ramifications and the functionality of the shadow. Is it called Shadownet? That's the name of the program.
Shadownet. Yeah, Shadownet was the non-classified name of the program after it was released into the public sector.
See, I thought you did a better job of explaining it on the stream that I watched than they did in the actual doc.
Well, I did, and that's why I wrote an on-background document for Bergey, months or a year ago, because he gets histrionic.
Okay.
And he editorializes, and a lot of times when you have information that's that damning, you don't need to get histrionic, and you don't need to editorialize, because the fact that it just is, and it exists, and it's being used the way that it's being used is manifest horror in and of itself. You don't need all of the color on top of it. And so that was kind of my advice. But, Millie Weaver took it in a different direction. So,
right. Well, how would you explain it? What is Shadownet?
Shadownet is a way of creating fake personas in online social environments that appear to be real people, that appear to be thought leaders, that will move true believers. The techniques are well documented, that they take true believer strategies, and that they apply them in a way to manage a group of people marching in the same direction, so that when you need to do things like control hashtags and trending topics on social media and things like that, that you have a mechanism whereby you can go game the system, and you can control elections, you can control sentiment of audiences, and it's a weapon of war. Jack Posobiec wrote a really good book right before he started working at the OAN called 4D Warfare, where he talks about how in a full spectrum dominance framework of looking at the world, the battleground for controlling humanity is not just where people are shooting at each other at least not shooting at each other with kinetic weapons. In the intelligence community, the space that you and I are operating in right now is called non-kinetic warfare. That is information that's being used to manipulate and control large groups of people, acting as a weapon, but we're not actually shooting at each other. So, my motivation for wanting to do this is to just get people to wake up and understand, hey, you're in a war zone and you don't actually even know it. And if you understand that you're in a war zone, if you understand that your likes and your retweets and all of those things wind up becoming, the bullets and the hand grenades that are being fought in this war, then you'll be more circumspect about the way that you approach doing things, or the way that you let media affect you, the way that you allow your ideas to be formed by the things that your friends are sharing with you. So.
Well, thank you. Now I understand that much better than I did after watching that documentary.
Okay. Well, did I go off on a birdwalk and not answer your question?
No, you answered my question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a control panel that lets you create personas that can then drive narratives and crowds based on those narratives. But I also wondered too, Peter, talking about the Ryan Holiday, Trust Me, I'm Lying stuff. If you're building a fake persona that then becomes a thought leader of sorts, you can then use that persona to talk to the media.
Right. Well, yeah. And that's the Ryan Holiday construct he calls trading up the chain, where
Right.
if you can control a trending hashtag on Twitter. Now, Twitter is a small platform compared to Facebook or YouTube, but every journalist in the world is on Twitter. And so if you can create a trending hashtag on Twitter and keep it trending for several hours or more, you're in effect controlling the news cycle.
Mm-hmm. But what I'm also saying is if you can build a fake persona and use that persona to build an audience, then that persona now has credibility. And then you've got journalists going to that persona.
If you use that fake persona in order to create a trending hashtag, then that hashtag winds up becoming the news. And so that fake persona is a link in the chain, but that fake persona doesn't actually even need to be the author of the hashtag, right? Sure. Once you get the snowball rolling down the hill, everybody's looking at the snowball. They're not looking at the little. They're looking at the big snowball that's going down the hill. They're not looking at the little one that started it at the top. So, let me see. Was flipping? Okay, let's see.
Yeah.
Was the flipping of fake news an example or counterexample? It might have been both.
Does he mean, do you take that to mean the flipping of fake news being stolen from the left and absconded with by Trump?
Yeah, wasn't fake news originally like coined by Hillary Clinton?
I think so. I want to, in Cheryl Atkinson's book, I think it was the Smear was the most recent one, and she talked about that. And she's got a TED Talk, I think, where she talks about the origins of fake news, and it was definitely out of the Hillary campaign,
right?
Because the first lie was that the Russians created all these fake news stories, or they were pushing fake news on Facebook, and that's what tipped the election.
Right. Yeah, and that again, there's a concept in intelligence called blowback.
Yeah.
And blowback is when you institute your own program and then it winds up blowing back on you. And I think that fake news is a blowback because the continuing issue that the cryptocracy, the esoteric control mechanism of the world has is that they've been used to having this monopoly over mainstream media that's only becoming manifest to us now. And the reality is that they are playing this whack-a-mole game with social media. You and I just created this channel today. We don't really have a huge agenda, except that we've been having these really great conversations where we've been discussing these things that we think that a lot of other people would like to hear about. And so it becomes whack-a-mole, right? If we're talking about this stuff, and they've just canceled George Webb over here and they've canceled somebody else over there, and we pop up, then they have to figure it out. And if we're clever about the way that we communicate, about the way that we tag things, about the way that we title things, then we can fly under the radar for a long time and build an audience. And that winds up subverting their, oligarchic control over the messaging that goes out into the world, and we wake more people up. So I don't know. Again, I think I've gone off on a bird walk. So
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
No, believe me, you're not the worst bird walk offender.
Okay.
Anyway, wrap it up. You bring it back around, and that Gilligan loop thing.
Right. It's like, so this is great. He said they don't have enough hammers.
Right.
Right. And they don't. So anyway, all right, Tracy. Well, this was a good first experiment. Maybe next time we'll have our YouTube channel figured out and streaming to that. And we can think of something else to do. I guess you guys should like and subscribe to the extent that you can. You can like the Facebook page, which is the Reality Operating System on Facebook. And on Periscope, I guess we're going to use my Periscope, which is Peter Duke Photo. And then we'll have a YouTube channel, which will be the Reality Operating System on Reality Operating System channel on YouTube, which right now, if you go to therealityos.com, it will take you to our YouTube channel, which won't have any content on it yet because we haven't gotten stream. What is this thing called? StreamYard to connect to our YouTube channel yet, but by the next time we will, and then you'll be able to subscribe to that. You can go there now and subscribe. And if you're using the Brave browser, it will give you some kind of onerous warning. Don't worry about it. Just click on it and then subscribe. And then we'll see you next time that we put something up, which should be real soon because there's a lot of crazy things going on in the universe. All right. Bye, Tracy.
Bye, Peter.
See you later.